People often ask me how my dog Ranger looks so good, especially since he's nearly 9 years old. And I jokingly tell them it's because he's not stressed about anything. Now, while that's partially true, it got me thinking. If it's so well documented in humans that stress directly affects our life expectancy, why wouldn't the same apply to our dogs? After all, they're mammals with very similar brains. And that's what's inspired today's video: how to reduce your anxious dog's stress levels and maybe, just maybe, help them live longer. As a professional dog trainer in 2024, I'm seeing more anxious dogs than ever. And while I have my theories on why this is, like poor breeding and the rise of bad dog training practices, I'm going to take a deep dive in how stress impacts your dog's behavior. Even if your dog isn't reactive or aggressive, this video is still for you. After all, everyone, including your dog, can benefit from learning how to cope better with stress. But this video isn't going to be about giving your dog a treat every time they see something that stresses them out. I'm here to give you real practical tools to ensure you're not leading your dog into a life of chronic stress. Your dog's unwanted behavior is often linked to their inability to deal with stress. Stress, like taxes, is inevitable. Trying to avoid it like the plague is only going to backfire when Mother Nature dishes out a dose of stress when you least expect it. So draping our dog in metaphorical bubble wrap isn't going to help. It's actually likely going to make things worse. Now, this doesn't mean you need to throw your dog into situations where they're overwhelmed by stressors and triggers to the point they can't function, but it's important to be aware of the following concepts and tools which will help your dog navigate life with resilience and allow them to enjoy a dog's life in their stride. I've had the pleasure of speaking with some world-renowned experts, trainers, neurobiologists, and psychologists on this topic. And whilst it is a subject that's forever open for debate, there are a few concepts that everyone seems to agree on, and I'm going to outline them in this video. Before we dive into exactly what you need to do, let's familiarize ourselves with the key principles. First up, chronic stress is bad. Long-term unavoidable stress will shorten both yours and your dog's life. This type of stress often happens over seemingly nothing, and it's something we need to avoid. However, short-term stress can either be good or bad depending on the outcome. Most importantly, it shouldn't be avoided altogether. In fact, short-term stress is often the key to helping you and your dog deal with chronic stress more effectively. Just like a shoulder injury can be bad long-term, a sports massage, although uncomfortable in the moment, might be actually what you need to recover. The same applies to psychological stress. It's necessary for adaptation. Avoiding stress won't make you or your dog stronger. It'll just leave you both more vulnerable when the inevitable stress of life comes to bite you on the arse. One of the worst things we can do when it comes to stress is avoid it entirely. If you're always carrying your dog when the going gets tough, letting them skip outings because it's a little chilly outside, or avoiding that puddle because they don't want to get their feet wet, you're actually probably doing more harm than good. Take the vet's weighing scales, for example. How many dogs panic just because the surface is a little unfamiliar? Stress tolerance can be built up just like any muscle. The key is exposure to small, manageable amounts of stress that gradually increase over time. Let me show you a practical example with Athena here. Our second biggest cause of chronic stress in dogs is actually too much choice. When there's an abundance of options, your dog's brain gets flooded with something called glutamate, a neurotransmitter that helps with decisions. But when there's too much glutamate, it actually makes decision making much harder, which creates a vicious cycle. The more decisions your dog has to make at home, the harder it'll be for them to make decisions outside of the home, making training them harder and potentially creating that chronic stress that we should be doing everything to avoid. It's like having too many tabs open on your computer. Each tab represents a decision your dog has to make. The more tabs there are, the harder it is to focus, and eventually everything starts to slow down to the point we could shut down entirely. And when your dog's brain gets overloaded, just like your computer, it can't function at its best. So what do we do to help with this? Well, we can start with a bit of spring cleaning. Tidy up the toys, the licky mats, and the puzzle feeders that have been scattered around. Then introduce a place command or a tethering system to create pockets of nothingness throughout the day. It's totally normal and healthy to encourage your dog to do nothing. And sometimes forcing your dog to rest and reset helps them from becoming compulsive activity junkies. Remember, the solution to hyperactivity is inactivity, not just more activity. Next up, sleep. I know it's not a new one, but it's crucial. Your dog needs around 18 to 20 hours sleep per day, even as an adult. But here's the catch. Dogs, like toddlers, will fight the urge to sleep if there's too much going on. And that's why sometimes you need to enforce forced naps using a crate or a pen. It's not mean, it's necessary. Without enough sleep, your anxious dog might pace from window to window hours on end when really they should be sleeping. If your dog is anxious, a radio with some calming music can help drown out any disturbances and essentially act as white noise, allowing your dog to dip into a deeper state of relaxation. And this leads me to my final and maybe most interesting point. Remember how I mentioned that short-term stress can actually help your dog become more resilient? Well, you can supercharge this process by improving your dog's HRV, which stands for heart rate variability. Essentially, HRV is the difference between your dog's highest and lowest heart rate throughout the day. A higher HRV means your dog is better prepared to cope with and overcome acute stress. This is why vigorous exercise and meditation are prescribed for people with anxiety. And honestly, I don't see it being much different for our dog. Think of HRV like the suspension system in a car. If the suspension is stiff, low HRV, every bump in the road will be felt and the ride will be uncomfortable. But when the suspension is well tuned, we have a high HRV, the car can absorb those bumps smoothly. Similarly, when your dog's HRV is higher, they'll be able to better absorb the bumps of daily stressors throughout life. To improve HRV, make sure your dog gets plenty of rigorous exercise each day, along with deep, uninterrupted sleep or some longer place work sessions. Just pacing around the house all day with quick on-lead, around-the-block walks won't create the necessary disparity in heart rate. The bigger the HRV, the better your dog will be at handling acute stress and in turn, the stressors that might be on the horizon. To summarize, not all stress is bad and you shouldn't shield your dog from stressful situations. You might need to teach your dog to do nothing. Sometimes inactivity is just as important as activity. Deep, uninterrupted sleep shouldn't be reserved just for nighttime. And lastly, everything mentioned above isn't just relevant to your dog. I'll let you think about that one. If you want more behavioral deep dives that improve your dog's quality of life, then don't forget to subscribe and check out this next video right here.